learn this aggressive style is just as tough on the mat as it is in the real world.
Can we see that one again?
Can you break the arm like that?
You sure can, yeah.
This isn't just used by Japanese police or in judo. The armbar is one of the most popular moves in MMA today.
To execute it, the judoka grabs his opponent by the elbow.
When you hold him, hold on the joint. Don't hold here. You can control your opponent by holding on the joint.
Then uses his legs and body weight to drive him to the ground.
Hold the ankle, and then roll him over.
With a thrust of his hips, his opponent's elbow is stretched to its breaking point.
Now, important to have the thumb pointing up.
Right.
And raise your hips. Raise your hips.
He's 70 kilos, I'm 125 kilos. It doesn't really matter when it comes down to an arm bar. It's all about your joint and whether you want your arm the way it's supposed to be for the rest of your life. So you got no choice but tap, 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 tap. I feel like I'm a tap dancer here. There are lots of ways to get your opponent into position for the armbar.
Very crucial.
But the most dynamic is to grab both his wrists and fall backwards. Then use your weight and the force of gravity to pull your opponent to you, catching him with your legs and slamming him to the mat. Keeping his elbow isolated at your hips and his wrist at your chest.
By bending the elbow across the fulcrum of your hips, you're subjecting the weak joint to the leverage of two strong forces: the pull of your thighs on his shoulder and your hands on his wrists. As little as 1,000 pounds of force can be enough to destroy the elbow. The leverage of the armbar can supply much more than that.
Okay, ready, buddy.
Next, we headed to Kyoto's Center of Traditional Martial Arts, the Budokuden. Established in 794 AD by Emperor Kanmu, the Budokuden was a training facility for his new legion of skilled warriors. Warriors who were to become the samurai.
Though samurai armor was often made of leather, silk, and brass instead of plate steel, the entire kit could still weigh as much as 60 pounds. Which is why jiu-jitsu had a technique designed specifically to use an attacker's own weight against him. It's called a sacrifice throw.
The head of the Kyoto Judo Association, Onishi Sensei, showed us a sacrifice throw still used in judo called tomoe nage. To execute the tomoe nage throw, a judoka uses his opponent's forward momentum and his own body weight.
Push him back, and then he's going to resist, and at that time you drop down.
Falling backwards as your opponent charges pulls your opponent off balance. Then, you drive one leg into his midsection to guide his momentum, lifting his center of gravity up and over and hurling him to the mat.
You're using your legs only. Okay?
Oh, okay.
You have to pull forward.
And that's to help bring him off balance?
Exactly. Break his balance.
The sacrifice throw is a simple lesson in conservation of energy. The stronger the opponent attacks, the further he gets thrown. It works like a catapult, where your opponent's momentum supplies the counterweight. The faster he's going, the further he's going to fly, and the harder he's going to land.
Oh, getting better.
This throw would be impossible if the other guy wasn't almost charging you, because you have to use his force, his momentum, to throw him head over heels.
Is that better? Good?
Good, very good.
Good job, Jason. Thank you. But Onishi Sensei wasn't done with us just yet. There was a reason why there was a group of big judokas here, and the reason was to kick our butts. The official term for it is called randori.
Randori is the equivalent of sparring in boxing. It may not look as tough as an MMA fight, but these are the same kind of throws, joint locks, and chokes used by MMA fighters. And they use the same amount of energy. Randori is tough.
At the office, baby.
Hey, these guys are good, man. They have really good technique. They're very well balanced. They're not the strongest guys, not the fastest, but they move really fluid. They don't try to force things. I think we're ready to go down the road and learn some more stuff.
And to do that, we would have to travel back to the ancient training grounds of a 500-year-old line of warriors. We're headed to the mountains east of Okayama, to the isolated dojo home of one of the greatest jiu-jitsu masters in all of Japan, Takenouchi Sensei. Our translator and guide, a second-degree black belt named Mark Chinnery, led us deep into the hills to meet him.
Konnichiwa.
When the Meiji Restoration of the late 19th century outlawed the samurai, their rituals and practices were all but wiped out. But Takenouchi's family strove to keep their 500-year-old traditions alive, including the practice of sword fighting and jiu-jitsu. Once employed by his samurai ancestors to kill, Takenouchi Sensei's system, Takenouchi-ryu, was sure to put us in the right mindset for our fight against a judo champion.
The patron gods of Takenouchi-ryu were Marishten, the goddess of war, and Atago, the god of thunder and fire. Placing a ceremonial gift of sake in front of their shrines, we prayed that they'd guide and protect us during our training.
After the ceremony, Takenouchi Sensei led us to a sacred spot, a mountaintop shrine dedicated to the founding of his family's martial art. Legend has it that in 1532, Sensei's ancestor, Takenouchi Hisamore, came to these mountains to train in isolation. His chosen weapon was the longsword.
And he was practicing on longsword, and then that's when the god talked to him and said, the longsword's okay, but you should be doing short sword techniques as well. And so that's when he started mastering the short sword technique. And then from there, because they're so close, then it went hand to hand.
A samurai would often carry a set of short swords with his longsword. Together, this pairing was known as Disho and symbolized the elite status of a samurai warrior. But his encounter with the spirit convinced Takenouchi Hisamore to focus his techniques not on his longsword, but on the close-in combat of chokes, gouges, throws, and bone breaking that were to become the basics of jiu-jitsu.
It's interesting to learn we come to the top of the mountain, and this is where Takenouchi's ancestors developed jiu-jitsu, from the long sword to the short sword to jiu-jitsu, which eventually bred judo. And it's really intriguing to learn that thousands of people all over the world practice judo because of that.
Now it was time for us to get to work. But the sensei trained old school. There were no mats for us.
Wooden floors, bad joints don't go well together.
Wooden floors and jumping as hard as you can onto them, slamming your feet into them, and then your hand doesn't feel good.
Oh, I think Bill dented the floor a few times.
I think the floor dented me.
The first thing Takenouchi Sensei taught us was the importance of reading our opponent's momentum. Each move we make, from sliding our feet to twisting our hips or dropping a shoulder, changes our momentum. And the same is true for our opponents.
Only by understanding how to see and exploit these changes would we be able to know when to use the attacks that we've learned. When to go for the hip throw, the armbar, or the sacrifice throw.
he's pulling him down, and Bill's natural reaction is to try and pull himself back up. So when he's pulling himself back up, then he's going to try and use his momentum to pull him down.
Instead of trying to force your opponent one way, you take him one way and you let him put himself the other way, and you just help guide him. It's much easier to guide your opponent's energy off course than it is to meet it on course.
Leveraging your opponent's momentum enables even the smallest fighter to gain dominant position, the key to any fight. In jiu-jitsu, you'd use dominant position to kill your opponent. In judo, you use it to score points.
This is one technique. It's breaking your opponent's balance and using that to throw him. So getting lower than your opponent and using your legs to throw him, that's judo, but then the kick afterwards is jiu-jitsu.
So basically all the striking arts are taken away in judo because it's really not competitive to throw